Hello, welcome to the show, Sharon.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy
Yes.
to be here.
Yay, I'm so excited. I love the flowers behind you.
Thank you.
Love that. I have my
Very-
own over there somewhere.
Very nice. Very nice.
And so for anyone who doesn't know who you are, where you are, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yes, my name is Sharon Papo. My pronouns are she and her. And I am the CEO and co-founder of LGBTQ plus eLearning. And we are a training company and we are building LGBTQ plus inclusive workplaces.
I love that. Very much needed, especially for the next generation of the workforce. So I love that. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you, what led you here, and focused on building this company and helping other organizations be more inclusive.
Absolutely. So first I want to give a shout out to our co-founder, Dr. Cornell Verdea Woodson. And I want to say that I come to this work personally because I used to work in a workplace where I didn't feel like I could be out. And that really had a cost to me. I sat in an office and I didn't have any pictures of my wife and children. And I remember looking out in the foyer one day in our workplace and seeing one of my colleagues run to the front door, and her boyfriend had showed up and he had brought her lunch, and she gave him a big hug and a big kiss on the lips. It's like, oh, thank you, baby. That's so sweet. And I remember feeling really happy for her because she clearly had this special person in her life. And I also remember feeling this pit in my stomach because I knew that I couldn't have that same interaction in my workplace. And that there were so many ways that when I had conversations, I was kind of tripping over talking about my weekend or my family. And when I left that job, I said, I'm never going to do that again. And I was very intentional about seeking out workplaces where I didn't have to navigate those things. And the data says that around 46% of people are not out in their workplace.
Wow.
And so this is, we certainly are living in a time where people wonder if there might be consequences to sharing more about themselves. And because I've had so many conversations with people who have struggled in their workplaces, we decided to create trainings, and we have this e-learning course called Building LGBTQ plus Inclusive Workplaces, because we know that when people have information, you avoid a whole bunch of future HR complaints and issues, and you have a workforce that feels more seen, and that it impacts morale and retention and all sorts of good things.
Definitely. That's so 46%. That's a very high number. I'm curious, like, how much of it do you think is cultural? Like, older generations don't really talk about their personal lives as much, or they weren't, they weren't raised to talk about their personal lives at work as much as the younger generations are just kind of showing up and they're like, yeah, like, here's who I am, deal with it. So how much of it is generational versus like cultural?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I believe a lot of it is generational, but we also are, of course, living in a current cultural and political season where literally people can't use public restrooms if they're transgender. And so in some states. And so I was talking to someone who was transgender this week, and they were saying, my job has me traveling to Florida for work, but what do I do? Because I want to do my job. I love my job. And I literally would be breaking the law to use the men's restroom, and he's a transgender man. He has a beard, and if he walked into a woman's bathroom, it would not go over well. And he would not feel safe, and either would the women be happy to see him. So we are living in this moment in time that I believe is temporary. It's a backlash. It's we're all navigating it, but it's we have
yeah.
lots to do.
it's just so wild to me, because we go from like a state of total inclusion and major wins, right? We had so many wins just from like a female empowerment perspective, like since the 1920s we've had so many wins, and then gay marriage, and then and so much inclusion efforts, and then to go backwards, I think is like really jarring for a lot of people. To your point, what do you think from and obviously I think a lot of companies have publicly scaled back their DEI efforts. What do you think about, the current state of that, and how companies are reacting? And then maybe also, can you give us a little bit of hope and a little bit of a view of what will happen and what the future might look like?
Yeah, I see companies doing one or three things. So yes, some are taking a step back. They're rolling back their initiatives. Those are companies that feeling pressured. They may not have wanted to do these initiatives in the first place. Some are continuing, but they're doing it quietly. They're changing their language. They're changing their job titles. I trained a financial institution a couple weeks ago, and the CEO introduced me and said, we're doing this training because it is in alignment with our values. And we're also changing some of the language on our website because we don't want to be a target in this moment, but we're also really deeply committed to our employees, to our customers, and that's not changing. And then there are companies that are doubling down. Apple and Costco as two examples of companies that have said, our diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging initiatives have been instrumental in building us into being the most successful companies in the world. It has supported our innovation. There's tons of data that supports that. And so they said, what we're doing is not illegal, and we're not changing it because it's working. It's part of our success strategy. So why would we change that? So companies are doing one of three things. And when we look at companies, like I think about Target. So Target as a company that has rolled back some of their DEI initiatives, and they've been really loud and upfront and very inclusive in many ways historically. Right. And so when we look at the data, right, there's a boycott of them, and in 49 states, they have reduced foot traffic. So, and we don't know they haven't come out with their quarterly earnings, but I'm going to assume that the foot traffic is around 7 to 9% reduction based on the state. And so you would assume that less foot traffic is going to have an economic impact. Yeah. And their stock is at a 5-year low. So consumers are showing up with their dollars, they're voting with their dollars, and there's something called the pink dollar, which is the LGBT community. The purchasing power in the United States is estimated to be $1.4 trillion. And that's not even allies. And so if you think about the economic impact of people voting with their people buying with their values, that this is going to have an impact. So right.
Yeah, and if you really look at even just the buying power of women versus males in the country, I think women have like 70% of the buying power, something around there. And when you think about the emotional decision making that goes into buying for women, I think the odds are this is going to be a bad financial decision. So I think it's I think I love that framing, because it's more approachable for the average person to understand. Like, this has a legit business impact, and the business case for DEI just becomes even more, prevalent and in your face, which is really incredible. So from your perspective, what are, for the average like CEO, let's say CHRO, someone who's maybe listening to this, what advice would you give them to help them navigate this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think that every company needs to look at their own values and what is the impact they want to have in the world. So you always start there, and then of course you're looking at your workforce, and you want to have retention and morale and all the things that is going to let you have the workforce of today and tomorrow. And so in this moment, you want to be having these conversations. How are you going to navigate this time? But also, when we look at Gen Z, so we look at the workforce, and they are 13 to 28. So they're already in the workforce, and clearly in around 4 years, they're all going to be workforce eligible. And so when we think about the future of our companies, what we know about Gen Z when we look at the latest Gallup poll is that 22.3% of Gen Z identifies under the LGBTQ plus umbrella. Mm-hmm. So that is 1 in 5 hires. And that's not just, then you have to think about all the allies of people who also are looking for workplaces where they can do great work, show up with their brilliance and ideas, but they also want to feel like they can be comfortable in their workplace. And so it's important that companies are thinking of the future of hiring and for today and for tomorrow. And what we know about Gen Z is that, unlike me, where I sat in a role for years where I had a lot of discomfort, Gen Z is much less likely to do that. And there's a lot of data on that. So it's really important to them to find workplaces that are in alignment with their values.
Yeah, we're not sticking around for just anything that doesn't fit us. So I love that. So just before we wrap, where can people find out more about you, about the business that you've created and the work that you do?
Absolutely. Go to our website, lgbtqelearning.com. Please find me on LinkedIn, reach out, connect. Would love to hear from your listeners about what folks are doing, what they're navigating, and how they're addressing all sorts of issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging in their workplace, and especially LGBTQ learning. And can I end with one final thought?
Of course.
It's the idea of the curb cut effect, if people haven't heard of it. And it goes back to the 1960s. There was this man, Ed Roberts. He was in a wheelchair, and he was really struggling to get off the sidewalk safely, cross the street, and get back on the sidewalk. And so there was a lot of activism by folks in the disability rights community, and as well as allies. And there was legislation passed, the Disability Rights Act, that created funding for curb cuts. And so not only did that make it possible for folks in wheelchairs to much more safely and easily move about their lives and cross the street, but suddenly it was easier for parents who were pushing strollers and people on bikes and elders or people who had health issues who needed canes or walkers. And so the curb cut effect says that when we do something to support one community, there are ripple effects and impacts that support so many. And I want to give another example, all gender bathrooms. So which is just a bathroom that has a toilet and a sink and a door. It's a single stall bathroom. And people often talk about them as being important for people who are transgender, non-binary, to be able to just use the bathroom and not have any stress about running into folks that might give them a hard time. But a single stall bathroom is fantastic. There's a parent that brings a child, or someone who needs an attendant, or anybody who just wants a moment of privacy in the bathroom, as sometimes people do. So I think that sometimes people say, hey, why is there so much energy? Why are we talking about certain particular minority groups? And I think that it's just important to remember that when we do something to support one group, that there are ripple effects that often have great impacts for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. And I remember learning about that case and in college when I was studying psychology. Love it very much. Well, thank you so much for ending that on that beautiful story and note, and hope to see you back on the show.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.